suit, or I don't know, it's trendy right now. So maybe like a roach costume, and just, market myself a little better, make myself more trendy on social media, because Doja Cat's music is dope. But beyond that, she makes herself relevant all the time.
Yeah, no, it's a good look. But by the way, in case you don't have the same figure that Doja Cat has, you
I
can
do
go
not.
you can go the direction of Jared Leto here, who also was on the carpet in a cat suit. I guess the more traditional looking cat there. You could go that route. He's also getting attention for it as well. But after it was all said and done, this is the sad ending to this whole story, Wiggins. We can confirm that the roach was eventually stomped, and it lasted just one evening. I'm not sure how long a roach's life generally is, but it definitely ended on that particular night. And celebrities everywhere rejoiced. I can see why people. Go ahead. Go.
I'm just they killed a roach on that carpet, so now it's the brown carpet, right? That's what they just did by killing a roach on it. It's the brown carpet.
A little bit of smear to it. Other folks that looked like that old Colgate toothpaste with the white and red strips through it. That was from like 1990s. If you guys are too young for that. Still, I understand why people have issues with the Met Gala and everything, the ridiculousness, the over the top, the gaudy nature of it, and then they all lose their mind like 5-year-olds over the roach. It's still fun. Let's keep it real. We had fun today, Jeff. Thank you for joining me on the program. It's a big Tuesday. Thank you. We'll see you again next time. Hope your week is great. Stay out of the Cincinnati area, especially the Texas Roadhouse. See if you can figure that part out. Thanks, you guys, for joining me as well. Hang around. The Young Turks is coming up next. We got Anna Kasparian and also Cenk Uygur. Go check them out. We'll see you guys on Big News Wednesday tomorrow. Get some!
All right, back on the X as well. Welcome to the Young Turks, back from yesterday at least. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian with you guys. As usual, plenty of striking news, literally.
Literally.
Got
him.
We're talking about a couple of potential strikes in a little bit. Labor movement, as we covered yesterday on Mayday special, okay? So, and later in the program, I'm going to say, unfortunately, drums. The Steven Crowder thing is really disgusting, and I barely want to cover it, but it's important.
I gotta say, I give you a lot of credit, and I give myself a lot of credit for feeling kind of grossed out by getting into like the personal issues that people get it,
Yeah.
Anyway, but we're gonna talk about Steven Crowder in the context of his former employees disclosing quite a bit about his leadership.
And guys,
as a boss.
that story is all about like, are people on air genuine? And I'll talk about it then. But the thing is, it sucks that all these guys on air are liars, because then no one knows what
Who
to trust.
100%, 100%.
Yeah. Anyways, all right, let's do it.
Well, let's start off with what I'd argue is the biggest news story of the day: a big strike having to do with writers.
The role of artificial intelligence is a new concern for Hollywood writers and actors.
Yeah, no, I'm not interested in directing a movie for a robot, right? No.
Speaking to his audience earlier this month, late night host Seth Meyers shared his thoughts on the looming strike.
I also feel very strongly that what the writers are asking for is not unreasonable. And as a proud member of the Guild, I'm very grateful that there's an organization that looks out for the best interests of writers.
Tens of thousands of writers and members of the Writers Guild of America have officially gone on strike after the negotiations with production studios did not really get to where they needed to get to. Now the studios and the writers union ended up experiencing a breakdown in negotiations, and the board of directors for the East and West Coast divisions of the WGA, Writers Guild of America, voted unanimously to call a strike effective today. So today's the first day of that strike. And if you're curious what the sticking points are, what is it that they could not reach an agreement on? Well, the main issues pertain to how streaming services have disrupted the entertainment industry and how the implementation of AI technology will further disrupt the industry. More on that in the next video.
The main issue is streaming. 78% of households now subscribe to at least one streaming service, but the writers say those series pay less and have fewer episodes. 10 years ago, the WGA says a third of its TV writers worked at the minimum salary. It's now half. But studio producers say their budgets are already stretched and they can't make a profit by paying more when revenues are falling. Also playing a role in the labor talks, AI. The writers want assurances that studios won't use artificial intelligence like ChatGPT to generate new scripts.
The role of artificial intelligence is a new concern for Hollywood writers and actors.
Yeah, no, I'm not interested in directing a movie for a robot, right? No.
I think the most clear-cut part of this that I am 1000% in favor of is the writers pushing back against the implementation of AI, wanting actual regulations and rules to be implemented when it comes to the implementation of AI. The other part of it, which is the disruption that was introduced to the entertainment industry as a result of these streaming services, is a lot more difficult because, and let me just be clear, I 100% support the workers here because they are obviously making less money and they deserve to get paid more. However, at the same time, it's difficult to figure out how it's gonna work because of just how disruptive streaming services happen to be. There's also the issue of residuals. So as CNN writes, writers have traditionally gotten residuals when a show they wrote is sold to run again in syndication or on basic cable. But they're unlikely to get meaningful residuals, if any at all, when they create original content for streaming services as contracts stand today. The Guild was fighting in these negotiations for some kind of ongoing compensation for streaming services. And I do have some numbers in regard to how much these streaming services have made. For instance, Netflix made almost $5 billion in net income in 2022 alone. And so the question is, how do you figure out a way to, I guess, redistribute that wealth in a way that makes sense? Because this is a different way of earning revenue. It is different from, the advertising that comes along with the content that TV writers put out. So, Cenk, I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, so guys, this is a super complicated issue. And so I'm gonna break down for you what the problems with handling this cleanly is. But first, I wanna be clear, I support the writers. In case you're concerned about bias, I do have a little bit of bias, I guess, in both directions. I run a digital media company, but I was also a TV writer. That's why I came to LA in the first place. And my bias also is that the number one most important thing to make a movie or TV show work is the writers. I've always thought that was the most obvious thing in the world. Who cares what the actors and the director and the executives do? If you didn't write a good script, it's all pointless if you didn't, right?
1000%.
So I can't, and not just because I was a writer briefly, right? Just for a couple of years, but not because of that, because it's logical that they're the most important part of this exercise. The second reason why the writers are right is that fact that video showed you in the middle there. It's overwhelming. In 10 years, they went from 33% of the writers being at minimum salary to now 50% being at minimum salary. There's no question they're getting screwed in that sense, okay? So now, the complexity here. So number one, yeah, Netflix made $5 billion, but we tell you on the show all the time when it's income versus profits, and that is income, revenue. It is not profits. So the traditional media companies are still very, very, very profitable. But a lot of the streaming services, they make a ton of money. They've got an unbelievable amount of investment money, but they have not yet turned a profit, a lot of them. So they say, well, how am I gonna pay you from a profit I don't make? Well, I actually have an answer to that. Take it from the other people involved. So I know that actors and directors aren't gonna like that, but sad day, right? So it's not like you don't just have to add to the budget. You could take from other parts of the budget. So by the way, now, before I get the actors and directors and writers all fighting each other for a piece of the pie, there's another giant piece of the pie, and that's executives. And nobody ever talks about, hey, we're not profitable, so should we cut the executives' pay? Right? So look, so that's a huge issue. And in terms of artificial intelligence, that's one's also complicated. They're gonna go to artificial intelligence whether we like it or not. I have a lot to say on that, but mainly that we should just put a spotlight on the ones that are made with artificial intelligence. And then if you wanna watch it, you watch it. Or if you're grossed out by it, don't watch it and support writers who write real shows. But I have more nuance on that, but Anna.
Yeah, so for instance, David Zaslav,
yeah, he's the head of Warner Brothers Discovery.
Exactly. Now. So I can't even believe this, but he was paid $250 million last year. $250 million in just 1 year. So when you talk about the executives, I think that you make a really good point there.
So guys, Warner Brothers Discovery is now this giant amalgamation. It includes CNN. So they are incredibly profitable. For example, CNN last year was really despondent because they only made $900 million in profit, okay? And so they're doing all these different cuts, and Don Lemon is actually part of those cuts that people don't talk about the financial side of it. They got rid of a lot of their, some of their expensive anchors, and certainly CNN Plus, et cetera, because they're trying to cut costs. Why are they trying to cut costs? Well, number one, because they took on tremendous debt. Well, whose fault is that? That's the executive's fault, right? And second of all, that's because they paid their executives $250 million a year, right? And so don't tell me you don't have money. On the other hand, there are plenty of companies that have never turned a profit, but by the way, they also pay their executives a lot of money.
Yeah, they do. That's right. So I think you're right. There are places where they can, I guess, in the context of the entertainment industry, redistribute the wealth to ensure that the writers that make this content possible in the first place are compensated fairly for the work that they do. Now, CNN also reports that although many streaming services are not yet profitable, they provide the studios with a source of income from subscribers' monthly fees, making them less dependent on advertising revenue that might be lost from the need to air reruns on broadcast or cable channels. And so, the streaming services also have a pretty massive stockpile of older content that could keep their customers satisfied as this strike continues. And I'm really curious to see how that plays out because, part of what makes strikes so effective is how it does away with either a service or a product in this case that the consumers look forward to, the consumers want. And when the executives of these studios are unable to produce that content as a result of the strike, well, that makes the strike a lot more powerful and it gives them more urgency in coming up with a solution to make the writers happy. So I don't know how that library of content is gonna come into play. It might not have an effect at all. The content that is likely to have the biggest impact or experience the biggest impact happens to be like late night shows and things like that. So any thoughts on that, Jim?
Yeah, so look guys, the writers want more on residuals, on reruns and stuff, but that's kind of an ancient model. And so I think, now we're in the weeds of their strategy and I don't know well enough to be able to criticize from the outside. I'm just telling you that we just don't live in the old world. I know like this town, LA that we're in, built on residuals. Tons and tons of, forget the writers, although some of the writers are super rich. By the way, that's why the writers can oftentimes have much longer strikes because they have the economic wherewithal to be able to withstand a strike that long. Now, as you saw, there 50% of them are at the minimum, so don't make assumptions that they're all rich, right? But actors, directors, et cetera, there's still $10 million, $20 million houses all over LA paid for by residuals. But those days are gone. That was the old days where Friends and Seinfeld would come, they'd get to 100 episodes and then rerun them endlessly on all the other channels. And every time they ran them, people would get checks. And the higher up they were, the bigger the check they would get. Well, the world just doesn't work that way anymore. So we've got to come up with a new model, but that's details. So in terms of the AI stuff, guys, like, half the stuff we watch now is half AI already. Here's what I mean by that. Any of you watch Emily in Paris?
No.
Okay,
Please.
I did. Okay, and I kind of liked it. It was
Thoughts
kitschy.
and prayers.
Okay, it's run by the creator of Sex and the City, and he knows what, generally speaking, what young female audiences want. And so Emily in Paris has every cliche you can imagine. Why? It's specifically designed for a certain demographic. Fine, mainly a human being did that, but they're engineering it to appeal to you. So now we're like 2 inches away from artificial intelligence. So the fact that they're gonna do that is inevitable, right? And then so if eventually people will know that's an AI movie, that's a human movie, right? And my guess is the AI movies are gonna suck a little bit. Some of them will be like Emily in Paris. You'll be like, oh, it's kitschy, I kind of like it, it's formulaic, et cetera. And some of them will have like twists and turns because the algorithm doesn't just spit out necessarily boring stuff. It knows that it needs twists and turns. And maybe some of it will be good, okay? But generally speaking, I still think you need human flair to make something brilliant.
No, by the way, we don't need robots to take, like what is the point of AI, right? Like
to save costs, to save money.
Okay, but that's exactly right? So that's exactly what the workers in this case, the writers see coming. They see that they are going to be replaced by AI technology,
and
so these studios can maximize their profits and cut labor costs. That is what they're trying to do.
100%, that's definitely what they're trying to do.
And I love the fact that, look, but this is exactly how This is exactly what I've been talking about, not just in the context of this story, but in any story where we talk about automation, right? If we're going to sit here and think that Congress, that the United States government is going to protect workers and regulate the implementation of AI technology, we would be mistaken. And luckily, in this particular context, you have organized labor, you have unionized workers who actually have a seat at the table and have a say in regard to, or could potentially have a say based on how the strike turns out, on how it gets implemented, on what regulations are implemented. I love to see that. I think that is exactly where union power matters and counts. Yeah. I'm worried about the rest of the workers in this country who are not organized, who do not have union representation, who absolutely will be replaced by AI robots because that's what their employers want.
Yeah, for sure. I'll end on two things. One, Anna's 1,000,000,000% right. The government is definitely not here to help you. And in the old days, maybe they would have, but now both parties are completely owned by the donors. The executives are the donors, period, over. And not just in this industry, in every industry, you're not gonna get any help from corporatist Democrats or corporatist Republicans, which is about 90% of Congress, okay? So now as to, well, between all the different parts of the pie, why should the writers get more? Well, look at this, they go on strike and almost all of the talk shows are canceled or on suspension, etc.
Daytime soaps.
All these different things. Why? Because it turns out writers are kind of important. Like the folks in front of the camera, 98% of the time don't know what to say unless they put it in the prompter, okay? Who put it in the prompter? The writers. By the way, we don't have prompters here, okay? But 98% of media does, right? So look, I say it in the context of news. This is a little bit different, but in news, I'm sorry that it's derisive, but I call a lot of the cable news anchors cable news actors, because they're just literally reading a script. So the only guy who pulled it off last time was Jon Stewart. So in the last strike, he did the Daily Show by himself, and it was still good. And I was like, wow, damn, okay? Everybody else was like, my 30 writers are gone. How could I possibly write? How could I possibly do a talk show without 30 writers, okay?
That's actually such a great point. And I hadn't thought about that, right? The fact that the late night shows just can't do it without the writers.
Yeah, and by the way, like even The View today was like joking around. They're like, okay, take it easy on us because we don't have our writers today. You need writers for The View? And the answer is apparently yes.
Yeah.
Because they can't come up with the ideas on their own apparently. So like understand that when you're watching almost anything in media, there was a writer who thought of that. And it's not the person speaking the words, 9 out of 10 times is not the person who came up with the words. The person who came up with the words is more important. That's why I support the writers.
All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got more news for you, including some positive developments when it comes to rail workers getting some time off. We'll also talk about the shadowy group behind the efforts to loosen child labor laws in America. We'll tell you about them and more. Don't miss it, we'll be right back.
Okay, back on social media break. So I was gonna do our members on the website first, but I noticed that's on YouTube members section, so I'm gonna read this first. Tim Crocker says, clearly no one's writing Jenks jokes.
Oof, zinger.
That's cold, brother, that's cold. Okay, but that's funny. All right, so let's go to our members at tyt.com. Uriah Heap says, when you pay A-listers what they get paid, what's left for the writers? Zilch. So that often happens, and I know, it just doesn't work. Like, it's complicated, guys, because could Brad Pitt get, 13 million for a project instead of 14 million for a project, and they use that extra million for the writers? Yeah, it could, except the agent tries to get to the maximum that he can get for his client. So they're not perfectly related, although they're in the same bucket. You see what I'm saying?
Right, and the studios are also obsessed with like the big get, right? Because like there's a handful of actors and actresses that they like to reuse over and over again. Like Emma Stone, she's in everything.
Yeah.
Like I know I pick on that a lot because like there was like a 3-year stretch where she was in every movie, and I'm like, there are other actresses. But my point is, Cenk, like, how about you guys give other people a chance? They'll build a following and a fan base too.
Yeah, so that one's complicated too, but because people do come for the stars a lot. But do executives overdo it? Definitely. It's a lazy way of making decisions. Well, I hired the big star. There's nothing I could do. Well, you could have hired a good writer. So they just don't want to get fired. So when they hire a big star, they feel like I can't get fired. So that's a lot of what's behind it. I mean, look, and sometimes they get it right. Look, right now the guy who's in everything is Pedro Pascal. But we all love him. And if he's in something, I want to watch it more.
I'm keeping it
real. Okay, so, but if it isn't good writing, it doesn't matter if the Mandalorian and Oberyn Martell combined and whatever his name is in Last of Us, it doesn't matter if there's no good writing. Okay, Art Guy says, writers work long hours under tight deadlines, translating imagination into compelling stories we now take for granted. Pay them what they're worth. Definitely. Naveenix says, Seth Meyers doesn't get enough love, would love to see him guest co-host TYT. That's an interesting idea. I was on a show once, maybe we'll do that over here one day. Lou B says, instead of residuals, how about a time sliding scale? Give them a percentage of the clicks. So Lou, that's not a bad idea. It's just very difficult to execute. It might get easier, and for the big guys, it might be very easy. I don't know, but I know that at the smaller levels, it's hard to put together. Ian says, but Lou, don't get me wrong, it's definitely a good idea. Eventually, I think they will probably do it that way. Ian says Hallmark movies might as well be AI movies. I totally agree, right? Liam Sariv says, curse you two, I still have oligarchy stuck in my head from yesterday.
I just can't believe.
And this is on Twitch. Felicity91 says, good, hell yeah, they should strike. All right, guys, we'll be right back. TYT, Cenk, Anna, Luisa Cabrera, and David Balarasso. 2 excellent names. Thanks for joining, guys. We appreciate it. They hit the join button below the video on YouTube. And Chris Birch, as usual, gifted 5 Young Turks membership because he's a bit of a hero. We appreciate it, Chris. And everybody, you can join anywhere you are, wherever you're watching this, and we're on so many different platforms, by going to tyt.com/join and get all the benefits of membership, all of our shows anytime you want. Like if you missed the May Day special, don't worry, you just watch it as a member anytime you want. tyt.com/join. All right, Anna.
All right. More labor news for you all today. In a shocking twist, 4 of the largest railroad companies have decided to offer paid time off to some of their employees. Now, that was the sticking point that nearly led to a mass rail workers strike, which of course was prevented by Congress intervening and preventing them from doing it. But don't get too excited. While some of the workers have been granted some time off, it's not the case for all the workers, and there is a twist to this story. And we'll tell you about that twist in just a moment. But first, some details on the positive developments here. First of all, why would the railroad companies who fought giving these workers paid time off all of a sudden change their minds? Well, it actually had a lot to do with public pressure. So BNSF CSX, Norfolk Southern, and Union Pacific all say that they've reached agreements for paid sick leave with somewhere between 8 to 10 of the 12 railroad unions. The workers get around 4 days of paid sick leave, depending on what agreement they signed, and they'll be able to take an additional 3 days of sick leave from their personal days off. So these are good developments, right? Because this is what the workers wanted, but it's really important to keep in mind that this is not the case for all of the workers. I'll tell you which workers were granted paid sick leave in just a moment, but you're probably wondering, like, what happened here? How did they all of a sudden change their minds? According to several sources, the answer is because of moments like this.
The rail workers in the United States are not asking for 1 year of paid sick leave. They're not asking for 6 months of paid sick leave. They are asking for 15 days, 15 days. Now, the rail industry has said, as I understand it, that they just cannot afford to do that. They made over $20 billion in profits last year. They provide their CEOs with huge compensation packages. And here's something else that everyone should know who's getting involved in this issue. Last year, the rail industry spent over $18 billion not to improve rail safety, not to address the supply chain crisis in America, but to buy back its own stock.
Question about rail safety. Because in November and December, Norfolk Southern met with federal regulators and pushed back against this proposed rule that would have, in most cases, mandated at least 2 crew members on trains. Why did Norfolk Southern spend so much money, millions upon millions of dollars, lobbying against it?
So those moments did not look good for the rail companies. Looked really good for the rail workers who weren't asking for anything unreasonable. They just wanted some paid time off to deal with family emergencies, to deal with health conditions, to deal with medical appointments. But they were unable to do so because the rail companies had cut back on their workforce so significantly, from 2 million workers to 700,000 workers, to the point where people couldn't take time off because they didn't have anyone else to fill in for them if they took the time off. But now all of a sudden, they're changing their minds to some extent. As Greg Regan, who's with the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO says, the rail companies miscalculated about how the public would see their huge profits and the stories of how hard rail workers' lives were and not having sick days and the draconian policies they were operating under. Again, that is the president of the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO.
Yep, so I know for a fact that Bernie has been pushing super hard on Biden and his administration to push hard on the railroad companies, okay? So now, why is Bernie pushing hard? Because he actually cares about the workers. And that's, guys, you've seen me criticize Bernie Sanders. You saw me do it yesterday pretty aggressively. But the guy has excellent intent, and oftentimes on smaller issues like this, he totally delivers, okay? So he put a world of pressure on Biden, and he got a little bit back. This isn't a lot of sick days, which leads to the second reason why the Biden administration then put so much pressure on the railroad companies. Because since everybody saw the giant explosion and everybody's worried about what's happening, and then there's a strike, et cetera, and it seems like, you know, when Trump's in charge, he's like, oh my God, I look out for the American workers. He doesn't really, but he says a lot about it, right? And it gives the appearance that he does.
Yep.
And Biden pretends to be from the Workers' Party and then supports the giant companies and crushes the strike in the railroad company. So he needs something to hang his hat on as he's gonna run for president. And remember, he doesn't need much. All he has to do is get him a tiny bit of days off, and the press will call it historic, epic, and say Biden is the greatest president for labor that the world has ever seen. So he just needs a little bit. And then what he tells the companies is, look guys, if we have to regulate you, then you might have to do more sick days, okay? Because then we'll have more pressure. And it'll make it seem like you guys doing things voluntarily isn't working. So why don't you guys voluntarily do half of what we would have made you do? and then it'll seem like you were great heroes for doing it voluntarily, and that way we don't have to do our job and regulate you.
Yeah, no, that analysis is so on point, and I think you're absolutely right about that. The other thing I want to add to it is, while sometimes we might feel a little frustrated over Biden's or Senator Sanders and how incredibly complimentary and friendly he is toward Biden, fact of the matter is, I think it's a calculation for Bernie, right? And the calculation is, I have a relationship with this guy and I have some influence over him. And so I'm going to use that to my advantage to the extent that I can. I think that is the calculation I see from Bernie. So when he's going out there doing these cable news interviews and offering a full-throated endorsement of Biden's re-election campaign, I think what's happening behind the scenes with these negotiations and the influence that he's using informs the commentary that we see from him on these shows.
100%. Yeah. And guys, I'll leave it to you to decide if you think it's worth it or not. But in Bernie's calculation, he's like, well, at least I'm gonna get this, right? I don't love that calculation. I think you should play for bigger ball, not smaller ball. That involves a lot more risk and you might get nothing. So it doesn't mean that I'm right. It's just two different calculations. But I would push much more aggressively to get much bigger results. But don't get it twisted. Bernie's the only one trying to get any results.
That's right.
So, and here he pushed super hard and he pushed his chips in for what? For like credit? No, nobody gives him credit anyway outside of us. And half the time we criticize him, right? But only when things make sense. But on this, he plays small ball, but he delivered on small ball. And by the way, to those workers, it ain't small at all.
Exactly, yeah, 100%. Now, are you ready for the twist? Because there is a twist. And the twist is unfortunately not a good one. So while some of the workers have been granted paid time off, the workers who happen to need that paid time off the most have not gotten it. So that is the twist. So according to Mark Wallace, the first vice president of the Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, the railroads went to the non-operating crafts first and cut a deal with them. If a carman who inspects and repairs rail cars has to call in sick and doesn't come to work, the train will still run. If the engineer or conductor has to call in sick, the train is probably not going to go that day, right? So remember, the workers who actually have to be there to operate the trains, like those are the people who have been just asking for the paid time off. They're the ones who aren't afforded the paid time off if they have a family emergency, a medical emergency, or what have you. And unfortunately, it appears that the railroad specifically went to the non-operating crafts, as Mark Wallace points out, in lieu of those who needed the time off the most.
Yeah, look, that shows you a couple of things. First is, well, those other folks don't even affect the train's ability to execute their mission, and so it actually means that it doesn't cost them a big amount of money. The company's it just costs them the sick days involved, which is actually tiny. The issue here is, well, if it stops the train, then it costs them a lot of money, right? By the way, not nearly as much as they got in the buybacks, like $18 billion in buybacks shows you they have a vat of money, so much money they don't know what to do with it. They're just being, cruel as usual. Like this system mandates cruelty. You must get every dollar. But even so, for the workers that don't make the trains run on that particular day, they could have given them sick days anytime they wanted.
Exactly.
There wasn't any necessity to not give them sick days.
But they did it anyway.
Exactly, because you have to save every penny and transfer it to the executives and the shareholders. Every penny. If you don't do that and you don't crush all of your workers, you will be fired. That's the system. So as I see that reporter asking the CEO there a great question about, hey, it looks like you had money for lobbying. I think, why don't you ask that on every issue?
100%.
But I loved it on that, but it got why? Because there was a spotlight on it. Put spotlights on more of these issues and then ask the executives, what are you doing with all that money? Why do you say you can't do safety? You can't give your workers money? Challenge them, be journalists. Not just in this case, but in every case. Thanks to Bernie Sanders for fighting back on this and putting a spotlight on it. Our members are already writing him. Mainstream media is trying to give credit to Pete Buttigieg.
I mean, no.
You gotta be kidding me.
No. Anyway, let's move on. We've got some more news. This one is not a happy story, unfortunately, because it has to do with children engaging in labor. So let's talk about it.
Champ. Hey, Dad Self. Before you know it, it'll be time for you to go out there and get a job.
Because I'm growing up so fast?
No, it's because states across the country are rolling back child labor protections.
Why?
Because we're telling them to.
Who are you?
A think tank based in Florida, and we're their lobbying arm. We've had a lot of success among Republicans to relax regulations that keep kids from working long hours in dangerous conditions.
What exactly is going on with the several red states that have chosen to either introduce or sign into law new rules that would loosen child labor laws? Well, it turns out that there's actually an organization behind it that is heavily funded by conservatives, a lot of big name conservatives that we've talked about on this show quite a bit. It's called the Foundation for Government Accountability, and this is how the right wing gets what it wants. They are well funded, well organized. They work together to get exactly what they want. And in this case, it's loosening child labor laws in states like Arkansas. So for example, this was the group that was behind the law that was recently passed in Arkansas, which of course eliminated permits and age verification for employees under the age of 16. Okay, the bill's sponsor, State Representative Rebecca Burks, said in a hearing that the legislation, quote, came to me from the Foundation for Government Accountability. Okay.
I like that admission.
No, I mean, it was super transparent, but let's also be clear, right? The reason why all of these super wealthy conservatives get together and create organizations with these like funny sounding names, right? The Foundation for Government Accountability sounds awesome, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's the exact opposite.
It's the exact opposite. The reason why they do it is because they want to essentially shroud their efforts in something that sounds good, but in reality is horrific.
I'm just real quick aside, so you know how this game is played. I explained in chapter 4 of Justice is Coming. That's a book that's coming out soon that I wrote. Lewis Powell wrote a memo in 1971, and one of the things he said in that legendary memo about how they could take over the country for corporate rule was, let's create these think tanks where we will pretend that these are the experts in the field, and we'll get the media to keep quoting them, and we'll have them then go into the media and even into politics, and we'll use them as the scholars, etc., to pretend that the corporate position is correct, okay? And they do it all the time, and now it's so open and there's no journalism left in the country at all, so a politician can just openly say, oh yeah, I got that idea by the think tank.
1000%, yeah.
When the think tank's just nothing but a corrupt gateway for corporations who want to use child labor. But the press goes, bravo, way to get it from a think tank. A lot of thinking going on there.
To be fair, in this particular story, the Washington Post did a decent job in uncovering this group and how they're the ones behind the efforts to loosen child labor laws. What's incredible is there's the organization, right? The Foundation for Government Accountability. They have their own lobbying arm as well, which is known as the Opportunity Solutions Project. Again, love the euphemistic names. They're fantastic, right?
I'm gonna do another quick aside. I named the money to get the movement to get money out of politics, Wolfpack. And everyone in Washington hates that name. They're like, why isn't it a nice name like Americans for America? Okay?
No, but they're kind of right.
No, because I wanted it to be populist. I don't want it to be guys who just, Americans for sunny days. No, we're coming to get you sons of bitches because we're sick of the corruption. And we don't mean it physically, but we mean it in terms of politically, rhetorically, etc. Let's go get them. I'm sick and tired of this corruption. Now they're coming for our kids.
So as I mentioned, there's the Opportunity Solutions Project, which is the lobbying arm of this right-wing group trying to loosen the child labor laws. Keep that in mind as I tell you more about what's going on here. In May of 2022, meaning last year, Opportunity Solutions Project lobbyist James Harris forwarded 2 draft child worker bills to Daniel Wilhelm, the chief of staff to Missouri State Senator Andrew Koenig, chair of the Chamber's Committee on Education and Workforce Development, according to emails obtained through open records laws. So the lobbyist sends drafts of the legislation they want to the state lawmakers. Like, yo, this is what you need to do now.
Yeah, politicians, guys, are just actors.
Puppets.
They're just little silly little puppets.
That's exactly
And then the
right.
media tells you they're amazing people. Oh, the revered, honorable gentlewoman from Maryland. No, the stupid actor who's the servant of the rich from Maryland. That's the correct way of saying it.
So I like that. Now Koenig introduced the measure as one of the first bills filed for the Missouri legislature's 2023 session. Harris then testified in support of the legislation in a February hearing. Really nothing to add, Harris said, referring to Koenig's opening remarks touting the bill, other than you're right. And if you're wondering, okay, you keep mentioning these wealthy conservatives, like who are they? Well, the top donor to this group, the Elon family. So let's go to graphic 6 here, because the Foundation for Government Accountability had quite a bit of revenue in 2020. And the majority of that revenue, $3 million of the $10.6 million, came from the Elon family.
Yeah, so guys, this is another part of what's wrong with our system. But despite the right wing screaming from the rooftops nonstop, oh, Soros, George Soros, the left actually has almost no money, okay? And almost all the money on the left goes to corporate Democrats who have the same goddamn agenda as corporate Republicans, okay? Meanwhile, the right wing is flush with money. They don't know where to put it. They're like, let's pretend there's a think tank over there, give it to the lobbyist over here. Let's buy off a bunch of pundits and have them switch from the left to the right. We'll get them a nice house in Florida, et cetera, et cetera. So look at all this money gushing out of there. Why do you think they're doing it? For their health? Because they just ideologically think, I need 13-year-olds working. That'll give them the backbone they need to be better human beings.
They want cheap labor.
No, they want cheap labor.
They want to exploit your kids.
Period.
That's it, that's what this is. They don't want to, I mean, look, when you're young, you have less power, right? And they don't want to have to deal with paying people fair wages. They don't want to have to deal with the costs associated with, employing actual adults. And I do want to give you some more information on this, because the lobbyists for this right-wing organization have been working in 22 different states as of now. I'm sure they'll expand it in the future. So you have the corruption with money in politics. You have literal lobbyists handing draft legislation to state lawmakers to pass. And to be sure, they do exactly as they're told, because they're taking money from them as donors. So of course they're gonna do exactly what they're told. Like, the corruption is the heart, the root of pretty much every policy related issue we have in this country.
So we show that fake picture of the guy, the lobbyist stuffing the money in the politician's pocket, right? If that happened in real life, most journalists would be like, I don't see it, he's just talking to him. He's just talking to him. He's sharing his ideology. And coincidentally, they happen to have the same ideology, which is take your kids and make them work for really low wages so they can increase their profits, and then take a small percentage of those profits and give it to think tanks and politicians so that they can get more kids to exploit. Oh, but I don't see it. I don't see the corruption.
And honestly, I don't think, this is my speculation, right? But I don't think it's a coincidence that as the United States is upping the ante in terms of like its adversarial rhetoric toward China, all of a sudden companies based in the United States are looking for other workers to exploit.
Yeah, and so they say, we got to make sure that we, not just China, we got to end the undocumented immigrants from coming in. Of course, they would say illegal, et cetera. It's outrageous, we can't have it. And then they're like, but we have nearly full employment, so what are we gonna do? Oh, I got a great idea. We could replace the immigrants with tiny little kids and pay them the same crappy salaries that we pay immigrants. Okay, you guys like that? Man, we fought for decade after decade, way back in the day, to make sure that our kids would not be exploited and they would not be sent into coal mines and assembly lines, et cetera. Now we're back to the bad old days. And nobody's doing a goddamn thing about it.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we've got more news for you, including, what are we going to talk about next? Give me.
Well, we got a couple of things for sure that you want to check out. First
that's
of all,
right.
We got Tucker Carlson's leaked tapes. These ones are bad. We got Elon Musk getting slammed by other elites. That's interesting. and then Steven Crowder's hot mess.
Come back for the next segment to see elite on elite violence.
Boom. First, don't forget our podcasting network. Second, don't forget our newsletter. Newsletter's excellent, progressive newsletter. I think it's the only one in the country, and it's a really good one. tyt.com/newsletter to sign up for it. Now let's go to YouTube Super Chat. ACGC says, if the right wants to have children work and force them to have babies living like adults, then lower the voting age to 10 and give them the vote. We'll be able to watch the GOP cry. ACGC, I think you're really onto something there. So I know that you're doing hyperbole, et cetera, but it's a really fair thing to say. If you want to lower the age at which kids can go to work, no problem. That means you think that they're mature enough to make important decisions in a work environment. Obviously, that means they're mature enough to vote. So we got a deal? So you lower the age to 15 for working, we lower the age to voting for voting to 15. Deal? Deal? Don't tell me, it obviously makes perfect sense, right? And the Republicans would, you're 100% right, cry and cry, we can't have young people voting, they're just widgets for us to stuff into our machines and pay really low wages to.
Well, I mean, what I'm really curious about is how the average Republican voter is gonna react to getting replaced, not just by AI, but also by kids.
I know, they're gonna love it. You know why? Because I saw the polls today, same polls as out every time, and every time the media calls it shocking. There's only one thing that Republican voters care about. 85% of their concern, I think, if I remember right. Number one on their list, not healthcare, not wages, not any of that stuff. Owning the libs. Whoever is more angry and attacks liberals more is the candidate they want the most. It's the number one issue to them. So you could take their kids and say, hey, your kids are now gonna replace you. And we're gonna cut your salary and we're gonna pay your kids a quarter of the salary, but don't worry, we hate the people on the other side. They're like, right away, yes sir, right away. You hate them, you hate them? Who hates them the most? Trump does? Great, I love it. Cut my salary, give it to my kids. God damn it. Hey, right wingers, wake up. They're also robbing you. So because you hate the other guy so much, you're like, oh yeah, rob my house, who cares? And then you get super angry. Why do you think you're angry? Because you allowed yourself to be robbed by a bunch of elites just because they call themselves Republicans. We have rebelled on the Democratic side. We don't like our elites. You go, oh, well, I don't love McConnell, but Trump, oh my God. The most corrupt guy in politics is a demigod. He can cut my salary all day long. Trump laughs in your face. He says, oh yeah, we shouldn't even have a minimum wage. You should get less than $7.25. Go ahead, right wing, support him. Go ahead. I know, oh, I hate liberals, I hate them. I hate people who don't look like me. Great, congratulations. Anyway, Lars Nilsson. Today's streaming was always built on a dream. The platforms are constantly getting new content and it's expensive to have such a large collection. More advertising revenue or increased prices are perhaps two ways. See, those are reasonable responses, but they're not gonna do any of that. They're just gonna take it out of the workers. All right, we'll be back. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also DSP's Burger, that's a fun name, and SRV Dominator 1. Thank you guys. You guys are awesome for signing out. We appreciate it. Casper.
Tucker Carlson's in the news again. Let's watch.
If we're gonna talk about sex, I'd love to hit some of the fine points of technique. But it's your show. It's totally up to you.
We can certainly talk about your sexual technique, especially after your tanning testicles last week.
There's a pretty big possibility that the leaked footage of Tucker Carlson you just watched was leaked by Fox News. And I'll explain why there's a belief that that's the case. But the video that was captured there happened on a day when Tucker Carlson was going to be interviewed by Piers Morgan. Media Matters for America has been publishing these leaked tapes, and in another video obtained by Media Matters, Carlson makes a comment about someone's girlfriend.
You wouldn't? Okay, I'm not, you know what? I'm not qualified on that score, I will say. I thought his girlfriend was kind of yummy. Just kidding, in case this is being pulled off the bird. Yeah, the bird. Hey, Media Matters for America. Go yourself. That's the first thing I want to say tonight. Second thing is, totally kidding. I don't even know what his girlfriend looks like. And if I did, I would not find her yummy.
So that was not when he was on air. This is probably during the break or before he went live. And so the only people that would have access to that footage are employees over at Fox News.
So it's either an employee or the company itself.
Right.
And more likely the company itself. We'll get to that in a second. That's the only reason we're doing this story. I don't like these leaked videos that are totally taken out of context. So, he was joking around during the break, so that's it, he's guilty forever. Tucker Carlson is massively guilty for the things he says on air.
100%.
Okay, and I know he treats a lot of his workers like dirt, and that's why a lot of them turn on him and do the videos. In this case, I think it's the company itself. So I don't shed a tear for Tucker Carlson, but I hate these dirty tactics.
Yeah, so I want to go to one more video because I think out of everything that they've leaked, this is the most interesting because it gives you a sense of what Tucker Carlson thinks about his own audience.
Well, I feel great. I can never assess my appearance. I wait for my postmenopausal fans to weigh in on that.
Now, to be fair, Fox News does have an older audience. We do talk about that quite a bit, and it appears that Tucker Carlson is aware of that, but has decided to specifically attack the female portion of that audience. Nonetheless, why do we think that this was very likely leaked by the company itself? Well, because it turns out that there are people working at Fox News who basically put together dossiers of talent that has left or has been fired to essentially use against them or threaten to use against them to kind of make sure that they stay in line. Okay, so I'll give you details on that. But Cenk, any thoughts on this video?
So first of all, look, yes, it's true. The Fox News audience is very old. And so sorry, and we have plenty of great progressives who are older in our audience too, and some of the best progressives. But having said that, the older demographics these days generally watch corporate media because they grew up on television. So they don't watch Fox Nation necessarily, and that's in fact in another leak, Tucker Carlson was complaining that nobody's watching Fox Nation because Fox News's audience is so old they can't, that demographic can't figure out the internet, okay, or doesn't want to figure out the internet. So the average age of the Fox News audience is 70. That means half of them are above 70 years old, okay? And they know it and they joke around about it. Look, you wanna say they shouldn't joke around about it? Fine, and we're showing you the clips here and we don't like Tucker Carlson at all. You do with that information anything you like. But to me, the interesting part of this story is Fox is going to war against Tucker Carlson before Tucker even fired a shot.
Yeah, it's really strange, right? So I don't agree with the tactic of compiling a dossier of former employees to threaten to use against them. But I at least kind of understand that tactic to make sure that he doesn't leave and then start trashing the company, whatever, right? I wouldn't do it, but it's Fox News. I'm not surprised that they would do it. But why are they attacking first? I don't really understand. So let me give you the details about what Rolling Stone reported on this issue, and then we can discuss it a little more fully. So 8 people familiar with the situation tell Rolling Stone that Fox News and its communications department, long led by the notoriously aggressive Irina Briganti, has assembled damaging information about Carlson. One source with knowledge calls it an oppo file. Two sources add that Fox is prepared to disclose some of its contents if execs suspect that Carlson is coming after the network. Now, I will say, based on what's been leaked so far, if you compare it to what Tucker Carlson has candidly said on air, it's not that bad. Let's just keep it real. So I think that this was, if it is true that the company released these videos, I think this was like the warning to Tucker, like this is just a little taste.
Yeah, I have a similar but a little bit different take on it. So first off, look, I think when Tucker calls immigrants dirty on air, it's disgusting, and I don't need any secret leak tapes to make me dislike Tucker Carlson. My issue with Tucker Carlson isn't his personal opinions. If he kept them in a basement, I wouldn't care at all. That's his right as an American citizen, no matter how atrocious his opinions are. My problem is that he poisoned the American culture with the toxic stuff that he would say to get people angry and fearful and hating one another, right? So he jokes around about somebody being yummy or somebody being old. Sorry, I know I'm supposed to care. I'm supposed to be outraged. That's what we do. We go to our different camps and then we all get outraged at each other on every single thing. No, that's not the issue here at all. So why do I think it's Fox? First of all, one outlet that he's being taped there is Fox News. The other one is Fox Nation. They're slightly different with slightly different staff. Sometimes, I don't know their internal workings. Sometimes it could be very different staff. So it would have to be someone that's really close to Tucker and works on both shows, or much more likely, it's the person who holds all the tapes, and that's the company itself. Okay, so they've got Tucker under a $20 million contract, and what basically they're saying to him is, you want the 20 million? You know Newsmax can't give you the 20 million. You know none of these things can give you the 20 million. If you want, be a good little boy. Now, okay, the threat we talked about last week, you don't want to use the threat. You want to threaten him with it and dangle the carrot of the $20 million so he doesn't attack you. The problem, since we talked about it last week, is that half of the Fox News audience is already gone. So now what I think they're doing is they're smearing Tucker publicly to say, you see how he insulted you guys and he called you old women? So come back, everybody, come back. Tucker's not the good guy, we're the good guys. I think that's why Fox News is leaking this stuff.
Yeah, I think that could be true. I mean, if they think it's gonna work, it's laughable. I don't think it's gonna work.
No, but remember, they're like the executives are totally out of touch with their own audience. In fact, they hate their own audience. We know it because we saw the texts and we saw the emails. And they're like, these rubes, these idiots that we take advantage of. They're lunatics. They say things that are 10,000 times worse than what I said about right-wingers, right? And so to them, they don't even understand the audience. They're like, oh, what if we smear Tucker and say that he calls women yummy? Dumbasses. The right-wing Fox News audience will probably like that.
Yeah.
They're not gonna hate him for that. God, they don't know anything about their own audience.
Yeah, and remember, the reason why Fox felt the need to pander to its audience after the results of the 2020 election is because the audience is so obsessed with Trump, right? And so think about who Trump is. Think about the insanely insulting things Trump has said about women.
Oh my God.
Like the idea, honestly, the idea that the Fox News audience would go back to Fox after leaving as a result of Tucker's firing.
Because they thought Tucker was too sexist.
Come on.
I mean, these elites are so out of touch. They haven't met a regular person in forever. They have no idea who their audience is.
Now, if you're wondering what that secret oppo file of Tucker Carlson includes, Rolling Stone says that the file includes internal complaints regarding workplace conduct, disparaging comments about management and colleagues, and allegations that the now former primetime host created a toxic work environment, 3 of the sources say. So again, it really depends on what he says on those tapes, but so far, based on the description of that oppo file and based on what we've seen so far, if your theory is true and Fox is trying to get its audience back by having right-wing audience members turn on Tucker, I don't think it's gonna play out the way they want it to at all.
It's definitely not. And look, so Fox News is in a lot of trouble, and they're beginning to realize it, and that's why this is happening. But they didn't realize it when they fired Tucker Carlson, because they thought it's like the good old days. Hey, we fire Bill O'Reilly, we fire Megyn Kelly, Glenn Beck, it doesn't matter, everybody still stays here because we're the machine, okay? But they don't know that between that time and this time, their audience has become far more radicalized, including by people like Tucker Carlson. So when Tucker Carlson says, oh my God, they don't want you to suntan your crotch, that way you'll take the vaccine and be under the control of Dr. Fauci. Their audience frothing at the mouth goes, yeah, right? And so when you bring in like Brian Kilmeade and he's like, now remember, we all hate Democrats and those standard, right-wing establishment talking points, people are like, boo, when are we lasering our crotch, okay? So it's a different audience and they lost track of it. And I think this is gonna hurt them real bad. And so maybe I'm wrong, we'll see, but I don't think so. I think it moved on them and they screwed up here. Last thing I'll say is, I'm intensely curious about why they fired Tucker, because we shared a number of theories when they fired him, but Tucker didn't expect it to come now. This was a genuine surprise. And there's some percentage chance they did it because of like a Roman Roy situation, if you're watching Succession. Some idiot, whether it's senile Rupert Murdoch or his idiot son or whatever, was like, I don't like it. I don't like what he said about me in a text. I'm gonna fire him. I bet there won't be any consequences. Remember, the children of the really wealthy got there by being the children of the really wealthy. They're not very bright, okay? So I don't know what happened, but this was probably, and thank God, a massive mistake by Fox News.
But I don't think Tucker's done. He's gonna make a comeback. I don't know what form that will be in, but he will make a comeback.
Of course he will.
Yeah, he's not gonna go away.
Anyone who thinks that Tucker Carlson cannot now mount a comeback does not understand today's media at all. And this is coming from the guy that when they fired Bill O'Reilly, you can go back and watch the tapes. I said, Bill O'Reilly's done. He has no ability to come back, because back then there was not enough infrastructure in digital media for a brand like Bill O'Reilly, an individual brand, to rise up, okay? Now for a brand as big as Tucker Carlson, he has all the capacity in the world, especially after getting fat and rich off the Fox News money, let alone the Swanson dinner money. He could then form his own organization and get pretty large pretty quickly and be a real threat to Fox News. And the knuckleheads who run that organization don't know it at all. And like I said, thank God they don't know. Good, keep making more mistakes.
All right, we're gonna take a break. When we come back for the second hour, lots of explosive stories, including an update on allegations against Steven Crowder.
You know what the progressive movement needs? It needs a little energy, a little pizzazz, maybe a little caffeine. Oh, coffee. But what if it was Too Strong Coffee? Yes, new, toostrongcoffee.com/TYT. Look, this helps progressive causes. It's also organic and fair trade, so you've got peace of mind that it was done right, and it happens to taste great. So check it out right now at toostrongcoffee.com/TYT.
300 million is a pretty good number, Well, that's the size of the US population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts?
Young Turks has just passed another milestone, 20 billion views.
Damn.
All right, lots of comments. You guys are the best.
I'm gonna read a few comments from our members.
Mr. Methuselah says on YouTube, super chat, thanks for all the important work you do for TYT for the movement.
Do you know who had the first super chat when I got back from vacation? You won't be surprised to find out. Billy B. Taylor. What do you know? Billy says, rejoice, for Dragon Daddy has returned.
This question sent to us by Izzy Sanchez Jr. Is it me, or is Meghan McCain talking as fast as Ben Shapiro? Is that the way the right tries to look smart and intellectual? Well, yes.
Michael Nathan writes it on Twitter. Did Anna choose Cenk's outfit today? I'm sure it wasn't Cenk himself. Man Bun Jenkins Skinny Jeans says, so now Anna has pointed out, okay, that's his handle.
T. Joyce 1971 saying Donald Trump is good at pulling out of things, NAFTA, the Iran deal, NATO. It's just too bad Fred Trump didn't.
All right, let me do a little quick plug here. It's not even a plug. I'm bragging, okay? I'm bragging. Watch me. We have a channel on YouTube, a whole channel devoted just to the Young Turks. It's badass, right? Wow, man. I can see the voice.
You guys are rock stars.
Unbelievable. Senator Sanders, welcome to Rebel Headquarters. Man, you guys are amazing. We gave you what you wanted. Okay. Speaking of shirts.
I have a surprise.
You reached a lot of people. You are the Young Turks. And we have spread that progressive message wide and far. Let's keep it going.
Here's what we do. We go beyond the headline. We are willing to engage in transparent conversations with those who do not think like me. We also make sure that you know what's happening not only nationally, but in your local area. Make sure you tune in to Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Ritchie, Monday through Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Time.
Cool news, shopdyt.com now has books. There's a whole bunch of books there. You're gonna be shocked to find out that they're largely progressive. Of course! Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People, is there. It's a fantastic story from Jesse Jackson to Bernie Sanders to AOC that explains the progressive movement probably better than any book I've ever read. Speaking of awesome books, my dad's got a book out called The Original Young Turk, where he goes from the poorest olive farmer you ever met in your life to living the American dream.
Back on TYT, checking out with you guys. More news.
All right, let's talk about Steven Crowder. More former employees of Steven Crowder's have decided to come forward to talk about how difficult it was to work for him, how abusive he is as an employer. And before we get to the latest allegations against him, I think it's important to talk about some of the allegations coming from one of his former co-hosts. And these allegations were made last week. So Matt Landau is the name of the individual we're talking about here. And he was a co-host for Steven Crowder and then later left and is now currently working for The Blaze. So he detailed how Crowder had installed a Dave don't talk button in the studio because he wanted to ensure that he always got the last word and that his co-host did not get the last word. So here's more from Landau.
How were you informed that there is a don't talk light, and what was your reaction?
I was pissed a bit because I know my job. I know that he talks a lot. I know that he's the star of the show. I know when to throw him what he needs to be thrown. I know when to sit back. It's what I did with Anthony for years. It's what I did next to Artie. It's what I do. I'm not trying to ever steamroll him.
Right.
it was just, hey, don't be funnier, don't be, and that's the truth. I mean, it sounds bitter, but I knew it was true because I was pulled aside and I said it, and it was, hey, make sure if you're doing a rant or like you guys are riffing, he gets the last word.
You were told this explicitly?
Yes, it was all about the title and I wasn't respecting it, so there needed to be a light. And I had to make sure that, he got the last thing. So even if I did have a funnier joke, I would just leave it out. It was important for the fans to not hear it. I always felt that my job as a comedian was to leave out the good one. I have heard of it where it's just the star needs to look like the star. So I guess, it's his show, fine. But I also feel like somebody who's so pro free speech and non-censorship, he was really about censorship.
So that was Dave Landau, his former co-host. I'm mixing up his first name with Matt McClory, who we're gonna talk about in just a moment, because that was another incident that Landau shed some light on during that interview. So what are your thoughts, Jake?
So, okay, look, there's a couple of different issues here. There's the terrible wife video that we covered earlier when Anna and I weren't here. And then there's this new allegations of the people who work with him. Now remember, the people who work with him are all conservative. They were almost all universally fans of Steven Crowder. They were super excited to work with him. And the fact that they're right-wingers matters for another reason. Because right-wingers generally these days, and left-wing, sorry if you're gonna catch feelings about this, but that's actually the point I'm making. The right wing is a lot less sensitive. Like you do any tiny little thing that's a little off in a normal place of work or a left-wing place of work, you're gonna catch a lot of heat from employees, right? The right wing, you can abuse the hell out of them. They're like, yes, right? So they don't have the same sensitivities as the rest of the population. And he still abused them so badly that they're like, oh, this is unbelievable. This is outrageous. But look at the ego. I find the ego sickening. You gotta let the stars shine. So if you have a funny joke, don't say it. Then why the hell did you hire him? What did you hire him to make non-funny jokes? I think that's pathetic. Putting aside like, oh, workplace issues, this, that, the other thing. If you tell someone in your network, don't outshine me, you are pathetic and should go home, okay? So if somebody is funnier than me, which is not a high bar, or makes better points than me on this network, I love it. Because I want to actually support creators. Now that leads me to Steven Crowder. Remember, this $50 million slave contract, and I don't want to do this, not because of me, but because of the other creators I want to support. It turns out he hates the other creators, including inside his own company, and doesn't want to support them at all. He's just a big giant baby.
And a liar. I mean, it's now safe to say anything that he claims in one of these like lengthy monologue videos should be taken with a grain of salt. And you should probably think that whatever he's saying, you should believe the opposite of. Now, speaking of not wanting anyone to outshine him, there's a comedian, Matt McClory, who was supposed to fill in for him and host with Dave Landau on a day when Steven Crowder wasn't there. But suddenly Crowder changed his mind about it, right? So when Crowder's assistant later said no to McClory's appearance and Landau asked Crowder about it, the conservative personality unleashed on his co-host. He told me he owns me. It was venomous. I saw a different person that I had heard rumors about, Landau told Michael Malice during that interview. So it was another portion of that conversation. Now let's go to the latest complaints coming from former employees. I started with Landau because he was the only one who was willing to speak out publicly without hiding his identity. In this case, the New York Post spoke to several of Crowder's former employees. None of them wanted to be on the record with their names. They're worried about retaliation. Some of them also signed non-disclosure agreements. And so the Post writes that when Crowder's assistant, the Post also writes that they spoke to 10 former employees who claim Crowder ran an abusive company where he often screamed at his employees, including his own father, exposed his genitals, by the way, that allegedly happened a lot, sent out directives to arbitrarily fire people, and made underlings wash his dirty laundry.
Jesus Christ.
At work.
All right, so look guys, I don't know how many of those guys are still there, but have some self-respect.
They're all gone.
Okay,
they're all
gone?
former. Yeah.
Okay, all right, good. And if anyone who's still working there, yeah, you want to do his dirty laundry? You want to have him say he owns you? Okay, have at it, Hoss. But then, either have some self-respect and leave, or, just understand the decision you're making when you're working with Steven Crowder. Look, guys, we have a rule here at TYT. It's a rule imposed by me, and that is disagreements are allowed, okay? And I'll tell you, the only time that I get bothered is when anyone on air says, you're not allowed to disagree with me. I never say it, right? But sometimes other people will think, no, I have the leftist position, and you are not allowed to disagree with me. No, wrong, incorrect. We're allowed to disagree here on TYT, okay? And we're gonna allow it forever and ever and ever. So if folks don't like that, that's fine. There's plenty of channels where they just do all robotic stuff, okay? So now in this context, we all have freedom and we all say what we actually mean. We're authentic. And I hate that the Steven Crowders of the world ruin it for everyone. By the way, also all the cable news actors, right? Nobody's authentic. And so then the audience rightfully goes, well, who the hell am I supposed to trust? This guy tells me that he's like a wonderful Christian, etc. And golly, Gene, he's got that face, and then it turns out he's a venomous prick behind the scenes. So
I think it was a pretty venomous prick on camera too. I mean, that was his whole brand.
Well, that's a great point,
And when people
Anna.
tell you who they are, believe them.
But the audience likes it when he's venomous to others. But I don't know that they love it when they see him doing it to his wife or to his coworkers who they also like. Guys, I mean right wingers who like Steven Crowder. Let me ask you. I mean, do you think that? I mean, is that like? Would you do his laundry? Come on, guys. Would you have a button? Imagine if I had a button that said "Don't talk, Anna." Okay, she'd walk out in 1 second. Do you want someone who walks out in 1 second who has self-respect and their own opinions and their own strength? Or do you want a bunch of stupid lackeys who go, oh yes, Steven, you're so right, Steven. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk, and I hope I wasn't funny. It's pathetic.
I'm gonna be honest, I think most people want the lackeys. Most people in media want that. They just do. And I think that Steven Crowder, based on what's been revealed about him, is an extreme case. But look, when you're talking about the entertainment industry, and yes, that includes content creators on these various platforms, right? Whether it's YouTube, Facebook, whatever it is. As soon as they get big enough, it's all ego. And yeah, it's very Trump-like, but it doesn't surprise me at all that he is terrified of other comedians outshining him on his own show.
I gotta be honest, you know who that reminds me of? Jimmy Dore.
Okay.
Oh my God, don't anybody outshine me. Everybody laugh, you have to laugh, you have to laugh. Oh, that's so pathetic.
It is, okay, but let's get off that. Let's move back
He says, I own you to people who work with him.
So let's get to some specific allegations, right? I think the part that is the most concerning is how often he exposes his genitals, but more importantly, like rubs his genitals on employees. That is what they're.
Steven, look, dude, go to get counseling.
Therapy.
Get therapy.
It's okay.
We get it, dude. We get it. He put his testicles and his penis on other people's shoulders, on their bodies.
Let me give you
over
specifics.
and over again.
So a former staffer recalled driving back from Illinois in a van after a college show in March of 2018 when former producer Jared Monroe, whom Crowder dubbed "Not Gay Jared," was targeted. Jared was asleep in the last row. Steven was in the front and he was joking about what he was going to do, the staffer recalled. He climbed over and dropped his junk on top of Jared's shoulder. Okay, when asked about those allegations, by the way, Monroe told the Post, no comment. He didn't deny it, he said no comment.
When you get a no comment, that means he definitely did it. And he apparently did this, exposing his genitalia to Jared several times. Gee, I wonder why he picked Jared, the guy that he thought in his own shtick or whatever, joked around about how he might be gay. So he's like several times, he's like, please, please, will you take it? Please, 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 please. By the way, any other, that's why I talk about right wing versus left wing versus middle, etc. No other workplace, you would be fired immediately.
As you should, yeah, 100%.
Or you'd be sued to kingdom come, right? So, but he's so lucky those employees haven't sued him. It's unbelievable that they haven't sued him.
It really is unbelievable. It really is. And yeah, I mean, I think you're right in noting the difference between how employees would react in like a left-wing organization versus this right-wing organization, right? Left-wing, any perceived slight could get you sued. Or at least publicly shamed in a way that, in my opinion, sometimes is insane. But nonetheless, let's give you more. During a 2018 flight with 6 people from the company, another former employee said they witnessed Crowder put his testicles on his assistant and childhood friend, John Goodman, who shook off the incident. And Goodman, by the way, is still working for Crowder. And when the Post reached out for comment, they did not get a response.
Okay, so look, all this makes me uncomfortable. I hate, we talked about Tucker Carlson's leak tapes. I don't like the leak tapes. The situation with his wife, it's gross. I hate that we're seeing it. I hate it for her. And I just, in principle, I don't like any of this. So I know most people on the left are relishing this, like, haha, right? But I'm not relishing it. But the reason we're doing it is because you should know who these people actually are, right? So if you actually think that Steven Crowder is like such a golly gee, such a good guy, and he's such a good Christian, and all these things, and you see him yelling at his wife about you're not doing your wifely duties. Oh, just disgusting. It's disgusting. So, but hey, by the way, maybe his audience likes that. Because remember, they do, and if you think that's not hypocritical, and you think, hey, that's what I signed up for. As a good Christian, a wife should follow a man, and she should do her wifely duties, and if she doesn't, he should threaten to harm her, and and employees, they're meant to be owned. I don't know, right wingers, I'm not you, you make the decision. If you like that, well then maybe Crowder is your guy. You can't get any fairer than that.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, some in the elite class have decided to turn on Elon Musk. We'll tell you who and we'll tell you why.
Elon.
All right, back on TYT. So lots of comments on both Tucker and Crowder in the member section. All right, let's start with Boomer Dragon Cat. I'm an anomaly, a boomer who's not only progressive but just tech savvy enough to get my news from TYT. Thanks gods, as Anna's dad would say. Okay, and we love you for it. That's why when we talk in generalizations, understand it doesn't apply to everyone by a long shot. RFD Rameth Dragon says, on air Tucker is a douche, off air Tucker is a douche. Wow, Tucker's a douche, go figure. Winter Scoop says, breaking news, judge rejects Montana Representative Zoe Zephyr's effort to return to the State House. Oh, shocking. That's another case of right-wing censorship. Censoring people and denying them freedom of speech is awesome when you do it to trans folks, to anyone you don't agree with, but when it's a corporation, they have the right to speech, okay, in the form of millions of dollars. Trista says, Anna, you should get a don't talk light to rein in jank, but a bunch of silly emoji faces so that you know that they're joking, largely. Repcat, the political cat boy, says about Crowder, I believe, what a little bitch baby. Okay, well there you have it. Mickey C. the Silver Dragon disagrees with me. Says, sorry Jank, but I disagree that the right wing are more thick-skinned. If the subject is something that they're guilty of, if accused of it, they're screaming, crying, and throwing tantrums. Just call them one of them racist and step back. So I hear you on that, and that is very, very true. At the same time, in a work environment, will they say sexism as quickly as a left-winger would or a moderate would? Maybe, but probably not, right? And by the way, the sexism, I'm assuming, is real, right, in that hypothetical. But they can prove me wrong, and that'd be great. And they should stand up for themselves, and they shouldn't tolerate sexism or racism if it happens to them or anyone else. Okay. Deanne Loso says, I shared on Friday that I was in an abusive relationship. I won't get into what I shared on Friday. The video was very triggering for me. My ex was verbally/physically abusive and a true gaslighter. We really need to put a bigger spotlight on domestic abuse/violence so we aren't afraid to speak up. I hear you on that. That is a very, very good point. And that gaslighting in the video was just unbearable. It was so hard to watch. Okay, Funkin' for Fun says, who would have thought Crowder's an enormous douche at home and at work? Where were the signs? Okay, that's really funny, okay? Speaking of funny, on Twitch, Socratic Jaws says, has Cenk been on a writer's strike for the last few years? Where's the book? Okay, September 19th is when it comes out. You can pre-order at tyt.com/justice, but I did like the joke. Yelling at Tree says, is it weird for a New Zealander or Zoolander to watch TYT daily? No, it's not. Actually, there's tons of people that watch from New Zealand. They write in all the time. You guys should get together, do a little TYT party. I would love it. Thank you for watching. Jackal Dragon 1991 said, Cenk said Wolfpack and my daughters howled, LOL. I think a lot of you have been writing in about your dogs and cats that we've traded, and now I have a Pavlovian reaction. That's hilarious. All right, we'll be back. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. More news.
Big names in tech have soured on Elon Musk, and it's really interesting to see it. I actually want to start off with Jack Dorsey, who initially had a lot of confidence in Musk after he had decided to purchase Twitter, which of course is Dorsey's baby. But now with Twitter in decline, all of a sudden Jack Dorsey is changing his tone. Now, Dorsey says that Musk was not the right person to lead Twitter and that he should have walked away from his $44 billion deal to acquire it. Now, here's what he said verbatim. Do you think, he was asked, do you think Elon has proven to be the best possible steward for the platform? And that was something that a Blue Sky user asked Dorsey. Blue Sky is a relatively new social platform that Dorsey is like pushing. He's the founder of it. Dorsey responded, no, nor do I think he acted right after realizing his timing was bad. Dorsey also said that he doesn't think that Twitter's board should have forced the sale to go through after Musk was expressing second thoughts. Remember when Musk was saying like, oh, well, it looks like Twitter's lying to me about the amount of bots on the platform, and it looked like he was trying to back out of the deal. Well, Twitter sued Elon Musk to ensure the deal went through, and Dorsey is saying that was a bad idea. And finally, he also says it all went south, meaning Twitter.
Yeah, so we got more on other huge wealthy folks turning on Elon Musk. But first, on Jack Dorsey. Remember though, that he was in favor of the deal in the beginning.
Yeah, he was.
And I think if I remember correctly, he was gonna get about $1 billion off the deal, Jack Dorsey was. So he was like, oh yeah, Elon, do it, do it, do it. Oh, Elon's the light of our lives. And all these flowery language about how Elon was so good for human consciousness, etc. And so, like, I don't shed a tear for Jack Dorsey at all. Okay, so, oh my God.
I mean, why? Why would anyone? Why? Like, no one. Why would anyone shed a tear for him? He's not losing anything on this.
Yeah.
Who cares?
And now
Twitter
he's just
implodes. Who cares?
Yeah, and he's trying to push it to his new platform where he's going to make more money.
Which,
right?
by the way, is invite only.
Oh, I do declare. Okay. Anyways.
God, these people are unbearable.
But it is indicative that no, we're not the ones who took the crazy pill. Even they look at it and go, yeah, he's a hot mess. This platform's a total and utter disaster. There's no secret genius behind the scenes. Because these are the guys who were saying secret genius. They were all saying, Elon, oh, you can't understand how brilliant Elon is. He's the light of our lives. He's the most genius, inexplicable genius that anybody's ever seen. Now they're like, oh yeah, it turns out he's an idiot. and totally destroy this platform like a moron. So what happened?
I mean, I guess the one upside about Twitter is it gave Elon Musk the opportunity to show his whole ass, right?
100%. No truer words have ever been spoken.
I think that's the only upside we've seen from Twitter so far.
Yes.
With that said, though, it wasn't just Jack Dorsey who has, again, soured on Elon Musk. Someone else, the Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak, in a recent interview talked about how he was a firm believer in Elon Musk, especially as it pertains to electric vehicles, but has changed his mind quite a bit. Let's watch.
I admire some things that he's done for the world, changing us towards electric cars. But, you know, his real motivations inside, is he really a purist of trying to clean the air and all that? Gets shadowed by a lot of other things. And he basically got a lot of money from myself for a car. I believe things he said, that a car would drive itself across the country by the end of 2016. Oh, I had to upgrade to that model, you know, $50,000. And then it wouldn't do anything. I could tell it wouldn't ever make it across the country. And he said, here we have a new one with 8 cameras. It'll make it across the country by the end of 2017. I actually believed those things, and it's not even close to reality.
It's true. Everything he said there was true. Sorry.
So guys, this isn't look. I get like carried away a little bit sometimes. So I say it turns out Elon Musk is a moron. So let me be clear. People are smart in some ways and not smart in other ways, right? So there's no like one smart or not smart, okay? But the reason why I'm emphasizing that today is because not that Wozniak was a guy who was promoting Elon Musk, and he said he doesn't even really know him, has never met him. And he's just having an honest opinion about the overpromising, et cetera. But the reason I'm emphasizing all these guys saying, when you pull back the curtain, the guy's not all that he was hyped up to be, is because people get you to believe that there are these great men in the world and that they're just beyond you. You can't do what they do. And that's why they deserve all the wealth in the world. And you should never question that. I'm here to tell you, and now the other elites are apparently here to tell you, it isn't true. They're not some special magical beings that are unbelievably better than the rest of us, and that's why they deserve all the money in the world, et cetera, et cetera. No, when you see them in action, all of a sudden, when he goes public and we don't have the curtain to cover him anymore, as Anna pointed out, we see his whole ass.
Yeah, and in regard to Twitter, Wozniak had some thoughts on that, even though he's not active on social media. He says, well, it's kind of bumbling. I can't say good or bad. I'm not really there. And Twitter, probably needs a lot of change and revamping in most people's eyes. So we'll see. I mean, Twitter is a social network, and I pretty much avoid the social networks. Wozniak does seem relatively happier than most people, so I believe him when he says he's not really on Twitter. With that said, if you've been on Twitter, you might have noticed that someone had posted a pirated version of the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and it amassed 9.2 million views in a very short period of time before it was taken down. Okay, so the account Vids That Go Hard posted it. Bunch of people watched it before it was finally taken down.
So guys, look, mistakes happen, and it's not the end of the world if it happens once or twice in a platform, so I'm not the one to judge. But having said that, the reason why that's important is because Elon Musk created this fantasy when he came into Twitter that you could fire 2/3 of your employees and that it wouldn't matter. Well, it's a fantasy, it's ridiculous, and by the way, very anti-worker, and most importantly, just not true. So it turns out if you fire 2/3 of your employees, your product becomes super glitchy. And then oops, somebody puts a movie, you don't even notice it. Next thing you know, 9 million people watched it. Could the studio sue him over that? They certainly could, right? I mean, that costs them a ton of money. How many other things are gonna, how many other wheels are gonna fall off of Twitter and Tesla before we go, are we sure the guy's a genius?
All right, let's go to the latest story from the dystopian hell that we live in here at the United States. Private equity firms are not only buying single-family homes to corner the rental market, they're also buying up pet stores and veterinary clinics. And they're doing it to maximize their profits, which means they're cutting back on costs quite a bit. Now, I'm gonna give you one example. Back in 2015, BC Partners, which is a private equity firm, purchased PetSmart. And the results have been disastrous, but that is not what they said going into it. In fact, they said their goal was to improve corporate efficiency. And by that, they meant severely understaffing their stores and providing insufficient training. Remember, they're trying to cut back on costs to maximize profits. With too few employees to transport animals that died in the stores, carcasses allegedly piled up in PetSmart freezers across the country. So Vice did a pretty extensive report on this, and it is difficult to read, even more difficult to share with you as someone who really loves animals and especially loves my dog, but I want to give you more details in just a moment. Before I do, Cenk, why do we have a government that allows private equity to destroy everything we have in life?
And it's not just the government. I don't know what schmucks do businesses with these guys, because so they do the same trick every time. Improve corporate efficiency means cut jobs, cut costs, period, 99% of the time. Okay, so if you hear anyone telling you in a giant corporation that they're about to improve efficiency, that means you have a good chance of getting fired, okay? But as we just explained in the story about Elon Musk and Twitter, it turns out you can't fire all your employees because you need people to run things. And if they don't run things start to fall apart. And so in the case of PetSmart, when things fall apart, you have the disaster that you're about to hear. But then they will then take those companies that they just sucked all the money out of and then dump it on some idiot who's like, oh yeah, I think I'll buy something from private equity. I hear they're really efficient. Well, they hand it off to you when it's about to fall apart at the seams. And then every time they get screwed and every time they're like, oh golly gee, I don't know how that happened. Pay attention, Jesus Christ. Anna, do you want me to read these quotes?
No, I'll read them, it's fine. Let's get to some of the allegations and the former employees making the allegations. So let's start with Leah Romo Serrano. Between 2019 and 2021, Leah Romo Serrano, a 24-year-old former PetSmart employee in Tennessee, estimates that she was asked at least 30 times to dispose of dead animals on her own time by her supervisors. She said she would have to throw away hamsters, guinea pigs, rats, mice, bearded dragons, geckos, and snakes. And when we say snakes, we're referring to the actual animal, not the private equity guys, because the coolers in her store were overflowing with dead animals. Okay.
Hey, but they cut costs.
Some of the animals had been returned to the store by their owners. Others had arrived dead on trucks in the winter, and others didn't get necessary veterinary care, she said, adding, quote, sometimes I was doing it weekly because we didn't have staff to take a vet trip to properly dispose of them. So I was instructed to dispose of them myself. In one case, an employee said that dead animals had been sitting in the freezer for 10 months. 10 months. But that's not just it's not just the horrifying amount of animal deaths. There are other details in this Vice report that are just insane. According to several former employees, some PetSmart stores used to give bonuses to managers who kept veterinary costs low.
Of course, guys, this is what we've been telling you about every part of our economy. So we made a massive mistake in America. We allowed corporations with no checks, no balances, no restrictions at all. And we allowed those corporations to also donate to politicians. So now we're screwed because they own the government and they own the economy, and their only code is maximize profit. So don't get surprised by these stories. Don't get like I tell you about the shootings. Don't get surprised when one happens near you, because they're happening everywhere. Where you think it's not going to happen to you? No, everyone has a gun. There's 20 million assault weapons. A mass shooting is going to happen near you.
But don't worry.
And this is.
Yeah, but don't worry, crime isn't as bad as it was in the 1990s, Cenk.
Yeah, I hear you. Mm-hmm. And so, and in companies, they're gonna do this to every company. They're gonna cut costs so that they can maximize every single red cent. That's their job. So they're gonna cut more employees, they're gonna cut your wages, and then they're gonna have situations where, I got the freezers full of dead pets. I'm cutting costs, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do?
We haven't even
Just dump them somewhere on your off time.
Believe it or not, we haven't even gotten to the worst part, right? Because, by the way, I should note, PetSmart, of course, denies all of this, and they claim that the health and well-being of their associates, customers, and pets is their top priority. Sure, you're bought out by private equity firms. I seriously question that because, again, the whole point, private equity isn't gonna buy pet stores out of the kindness of their heart. They're gonna buy the pet stores because they see it as an investment. They see it as an opportunity to maximize profits by cutting the costs of the company they're acquiring. That is exactly what happened here. So please spare me the nonsense about how, oh my God, the health and the safety of our employees and the animals is a top concern, top concern. The top concern for private equity is profit, period. Okay, don't insult our intelligence. Let's now move on to the vets, the veterinary clinics that are being purchased by private equity firms as well, which is a complete and utter disaster. Okay, so there are logical reasons why private equity firms are attracted to vets. For one, the industry is huge and growing. There are over 90 million American households that have pets currently, okay? So there's a big money-making opportunity for private equity here. And here's another issue. Unlike in human healthcare, the Nation writes, customers tend to pay out of pocket for healthcare for their animals, rather than through insurers. This gives private equity firms cash, unmediated through third parties with which to pay down the debts they often use to buy practices, okay? So understand that, they don't have to deal with getting things authorized, they don't have to deal with insurance companies. They just, here's your pet's gonna die. You don't want your pet to die, right? So people are gonna pay thousands of dollars in some cases to ensure their pet makes it. I mean, okay. All right, additionally, the salaries for these vets get cut. They're lower than those of human health professionals, so they see that as an upside as well, right? We don't have to deal with high pay associated with doctors because veterinarians get paid less. And so they're scooping up these clinics fast. Let me just give you a few more details, Cenk. So since 2017, private equity firms have spent $45 billion on the industry. About a quarter of general veterinary practices are now owned by large corporations, including private equity firms, while about 3/4 of specialty practices like emergency and surgery care are as well.
So look, how do they pick industries? How do they decide where to go? Well, they do exhaustive analysis, right? These private equity companies. There's a lot you can say about them, but they're not dummies. They do their math, they do their homework, and so part of the reason they're buying up all the homes now is because they did the math on it and they're like, why do we want the average American to accumulate wealth? Why don't we accumulate the wealth and then make them rent it from us? And that makes, if you just cares about dollars and cents, that makes a lot of sense. That's why they're buying up all the homes, right? So now we're all screwed. We've talked about that a lot. In this case, they see the veterinarians and they go, oh, there's an inefficiency there. There's two inefficiencies there. Number one, since they're not doctors, we could actually either lower their pay or keep their pay where it is for a long, long time and not increase it very much. So we have efficiencies in how little we pay them. And then secondarily, since people love their pets, your veterinarian around the corner, he usually loves animals. And so he or she wants to make sure your puppy doesn't die, et cetera, et cetera. And they're normal human beings and they act like human beings. But when a giant private equity company owns them, they no longer have that option. They must charge the maximum because you have to maximize profits. So they're like, well, if you like Fluffy, well, you were paying $500 before for that surgery, but we think you'll pay $1,500 now.
Like, I'll give you an example. The vet that I take Charlie to is just a wonderful person, and I'm so grateful that I found him. And I remember Charlie had an allergic reaction. He tends to get allergies where he gets hot spots and everything once a year. And one year it was particularly bad. I took the dog to the vet that I trust. They give Charlie medication that he did not react well to. I take Charlie back to the vet and he was having gastrointestinal issues, I'll just put it that way, as a result, like a reaction to that medication. And he was dehydrated, he needed treatment. The vet's like, don't worry about it, put your wallet away, I'm gonna take care of it. And they treated Charlie, he did great after that. But the idea that that treatment would happen for free for a vet that has been bought out by like a private equity firm.
No, they literally could
that would
not
never happen.
They
right?
could get fired. They cannot do that.
Negotiating the price of treatment would never happen because at the end of the day, the private equity firm that bought these clinics want to maximize their profits. That is the issue. It takes the humanity completely out of the equation.
That's what they mean when they say efficiencies. We will be more efficient and maximize profit than these human beings over here, these vets who care about the animals. They're inefficient. They could get a lot more. Look guys, a lot of it is sophisticated and it's on spreadsheets, et cetera, but what does it come down to? If we're being honest about it, it basically comes down to we're gonna hold your pets as hostages. And if you don't give us every nickel that we think we can squeeze out of you, Fluffy's gonna get it.
One vet named Rose Peters, who worked at a practice that ended up getting bought out by a private equity firm, says, oh no, prices shot up significantly. We saw 3 price increases in the span of a year and a half. And when I talk to some of my other colleagues who work at other practices, either branches of the same company or other similar corporate companies, they're experiencing the same thing.
Of course.
And again, I mean, look, private equity knows. I mean, if your pet is sick, I would drain my savings. I just would, right? Because for a lot of people, that is a family member. That is someone that pet is such an important part of their lives. And so they're preying on these people to maximize their profits, to squeeze every penny they can from these people, and it's so disgusting.
Well, Anna, when you tell me how much you love your dog, Charlie, I see inefficiency. Someone could take a lot more money out of your pocket for that love that you have for your dog. Yeah. Private equity, they already did look into it. And that's what they're doing all across the country now. So if you've got a pet, look forward to higher costs if your vet practice got bought by a private equity company.
This country's sick. We're gonna take a break, we'll be back.
Animals are innocent.
All right, guys, make sure you're checking out Unboss's Nina Turner's show on the network, youtube.com/unbosstyt, or you could scan that QR code right there. Let's go to your comments now. Let's start with YouTube Super Chat. Kingdom 00 Heart says, as you would say, Anna, the chickens are coming home to roost. That's on the issue of Steven Crowder. More on that. Marco Pavlovich says, Steven Crowder reminds me of every boss combined in the movie Horrible Bosses. That's a pretty good point. Well, that was a funny movie, by the way. Nerve 2005 says, I was hoping Cenk would say, remember when I said there's only one rule here at TYT? I was hoping Cenk would say, the rule is no one has to do my laundry. Well, that's also true, okay, but that's not we didn't bother making that rule. If you have to bother making that rule, there's already something amiss. Timothy Pulliam says, teenage workers that can't vote is taxation without representation.
Yep.
That's actually literally true.
It's exactly what they want.
Right. So we're back to that era. It's almost like we need another political revolution.
Freedom, though, am I right?
Freedom. What a punchline. Jesus. Now on the pet story, Caroline Roberts says, my heart, this is in YouTube members now. Caroline Roberts says, my heart is breaking. Poor animals, I hate this. Mick Mitt says, oh my God, this is getting out of hand. Private equity is everything. Yep. Peter S says about Jack Dorsey, Jack doesn't know Jack after all. He also apparently didn't know Elon, but he did enjoy that money he got from that sale. Crystal Sheets says about Crowder, you mean the man who abused his pregnant wife and tried to make her submit to his every whim and desire has a God complex. Weird. AC says, do people consider Crowder a comedian? I don't know, you'd have to ask the right wing. Gary Cooper says Crowder's probably not the first person to impose a never be funnier than host rule, although most may not spell it out so explicitly. Gary, that's a great point. I'm gonna tell you a real quick story. When I was at MSNBC, I was getting killer ratings, and I was, with this one I was a guest host first, and I was beating the regular host of the shows that I was on. And a high up producer closed the door one day and warned me. He said, Cenk, you gotta cut it out. Because the regular hosts on this network do not like a guest host getting better ratings than them. You might never get to guest host again. That was at MSNBC, and that was considered perfectly normal. No, yes, the hosts that you see on air, unfortunately, have giant egos, generally speaking, and are not what they appear. So that's why I get it. Like, if people are even skeptical about us, well, who could blame you? Who could blame you? Almost everyone on air is a liar. It's so frustrating. All right. The Freedom House 1984 has a funny line. I removed Fox from my mom's TV just in case. That's really great. Renee Lumeray says, Too Strong Coffee is really good. Thank you for saying that. We appreciate it. TooStrongCoffee.com/TYT. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Gail Hefner wrote in from YouTube membership. Cenk and Anna, thank you for doing what you do. We appreciate you guys saying that. You really lift our spirits, especially when we got such dark stories like that PetSmart story. We love you guys. Thanks for doing the show with us. Anna.
All right, well, let's talk about what's happening with porn in Utah.
As you may know, your elected officials have required us to verify your age before granting you access to our website. While safety and compliance are at the forefront of our mission, giving your ID card every time you want to visit an adult platform is not the most effective solution for protecting our users, and in fact, will put children and your privacy at risk. In addition, mandating age verification without proper enforcement gives platforms the opportunity to choose whether or not to comply. As we've seen in other states, this just drives traffic to sites with far fewer safety measures in place.
If you live in Utah and you want to get a little frisky, potentially with a partner, maybe with yourself, while watching Pornhub, you'll be greeted by adult actress Sherry DeVille saying exactly what you just saw in that video, because there is this ongoing spat between Pornhub and state lawmakers in Utah who want to implement age verification laws. Now, Pornhub has blocked everyone in the state of Utah from accessing its content due to the state legislature passing these new age verification laws. I want to give you a few more details on that, and then I want to hear your thoughts, Cenk. So Utah Governor Spencer Cox signed SB 287. It's the online pornography viewing age requirements, and that signed into law, went into effect on May 2nd. And here's what the text states. A commercial entity that knowingly and intentionally publishes or distributes material harmful to minors on the internet from a website that contains a substantial portion of such material shall be held liable if the entity fails to perform reasonable age verification methods to verify the age of an individual attempting to access the material. Now, companies that don't comply will be held liable, and they could be sued if a minor managed to access their content. The law also requires social media companies to verify all Utah users' ages starting March 1st of 2024, and also block accounts of users who don't supply age verification. So it's interesting how Pornhub is responding to this. I don't know how I feel about it, because I do think that there should be some mechanism of verifying the age of people who are trying to access that content.
Yeah, so no, this is a near impossible situation. So what I was gonna start with is, look, I get the concept behind age verification, because do you really want tiny little kids watching porn? No, you don't. Most I mean, I hope almost all parents don't, depending on the age, obviously, but certainly under 13, etc. And for a lot of parents, it's 18, but that's parenting. That's up to you guys how you want to do that, right? So the devil's in the details here, though. Number one, when you say to a porn site, you have to put in your ID first. It's easy to say, oh, if you're under 18 or over 18, click here. Well, everybody clicks there, who cares, right? That doesn't really prove anything. But if you have to put in any kind of identifying information, nobody's gonna go to that site.
No, I disagree.
Okay, yeah, I might be wrong. Maybe some people.
Maybe with porn, maybe that is the case. You're right. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Because I don't see the stigma in people watching porn, but I get what you're saying. Yeah.
I mean, look, imagine you're a regular dude, okay, and now that company has exactly who you are and all of the different porn that you watched, how long you watched it, etc., etc.
Yeah, that'd be bad, I guess.
Nobody wants that,
Nobody
right?
wants that, no.
And so they're not gonna do it if they're kids or if they're adults. So that's gonna totally tank their business. So it's basically saying you can't have this company.
But what's really interesting is that Pornhub is already complying with other age verification requirements in other states like Louisiana.
But it depends on how you structure it, right? If you structure it as click here, yeah, okay, we can live with that. If you say, okay, get me I'm making up examples here now. Get me a photocopy of your driver's license and upload it to the site, ain't nobody gonna do that, okay? So it depends on how you structure it, which is actually gonna get to the main point.
Okay, let me get to that caveat though of the Louisiana law. Okay, this is what we know. Let's go to graphic 4 here. Louisiana has a state-created digital wallet that Pornhub uses to check users' digital driver's licenses. Utah has no such verification tool, and maybe that's the issue here, right? Like if they create a similar mechanism like this digital wallet, it could work, and Pornhub is already complying with that law in Louisiana.
I'll tell you why it works. Because in Louisiana, they don't know that Pornhub's getting their ID. Because they have some rando digital wallet somewhere, and Pornhub is accessing it through the systems that they've set up. But Bob, when he's going to Pornhub, when he clicks, oh yeah, sure, I accept, doesn't know that they're going to find out all of his personal information.
Oh, disaster.
Okay, that's my guess as to why it works in Louisiana and doesn't in Utah.
Okay, then
but in Utah, when you say, Bob, give me your driver's license, he's like, oh, no way, no way.
Yeah, you know what? I changed my mind. I'm against the age verification.
Yeah, now I'm gonna give you one more reason why you should be against it. Even though we all get it. We don't want, especially under 13-year-olds watching porn, right?
I also don't want state surveillance of our online activities that are completely harmless and none of their business.
100%, and by the way, you don't know who in the home is watching what. All of this is disgusting, okay? Okay, was it Bob or was it Bob's son or Bob's daughter or Bob's wife or Bob's friend who was over? Oh my God, all of this is such an unbelievable invasion of our privacy, okay? So now, but the last point pretty much knocks it out. Like this, because guys, what happens is if you get the so-called legitimate sites to do all these things that are gonna basically shut down their business in that state, well, it's not like people aren't gonna go to get porn online, they're gonna. And you know what they're gonna do? They're gonna go to companies that are based in Bermuda, Bahamas, Cayman Islands, okay? I know it, I lived it with internet gambling. In internet gambling, America said, oh, well, Sheldon Adelson has bribed all of us, so you will have no internet gambling. Okay, so what happened? They set it up in the Caribbean, right? And then what do? We went to it because people like me were gambling addicts, right? And we're like, I gotta bet on that game. But this is now, I'm talking about a long time ago when I was in Miami, 20 years ago. And I could see that their games were rigged. You play blackjack on there, and I don't want to get into a long conversation about it. Bottom line is, I thought for sure it was rigged. Why? Because they're based in rando country that has no regulations. So of course they could rig the game. What difference does it make? So reasonable regulations protects consumers. These regulations that don't make sense actually leads to the consumer being less protected, not more protected.
Yeah, that's right. And that is definitely a concern that was outlined in the reporting here. I think that we need to accept that the internet has, I don't know, destroyed your control and power.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways, right?
That's exactly right. And for parents, it's so challenging. So I'm not here to judge any parent at all. But we have to do parenting. We don't have a choice. Because you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't put all of the sites all across the world on the internet back into a bottle, and no, there's no more porn, and you got to drive to the Ramada Inn to try to get it from a vending machine. Okay, that's pretty specific, but you get my point. Yes, they had them in vending machines. Okay, but guys, this is why also all the other Republican laws banning drag queens from reading books in front of kids and attacking trans people, LGBTQ people, just don't say their names in school, etc. None of that makes any sense, because if you cared about the children and their purity, what are you talking about? The internet has donkey sex, right? The internet has every kind of sex you can imagine. You don't need any drag queens or anything. By the way, if you wanted that, that's also on the internet, right? And any kid can access it at any time. In America, we have nonstop, nonsensical debates. Debates that don't make any sense, and no one's even trying to make sense. Why? Because we got to do identity politics, and we got to hate each other so that the people in power can continue to rob us. And this is just another example of it.
Yep.
All right, guys, what do we have in the bonus episode? Because the members are gonna love it. tyt.com/join to become a member, or hit the join button below the video on YouTube.
We're going to talk about the Met Gala and a moment from the Met Gala that enraged me.
Yeah, and unfortunately it represents and is very symbolic of the elites and how they treat the rest of us. So either become a member now or all the members. We'll see you there in a minute.
Indisputable has been named the fastest growing news TV show in the United States of America, compared to all shows on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and roughly 30 others. What do we do on this show? We tell the truth. You know why we tell the truth? Because the truth is simply indisputable. Donald Trump radicalized citizens. He's the chief terrorist. Republicans still want you to think that critical race theory is the greatest evil that can happen in K-12 education. It's not even taught. I guarantee you this, David. If he would have taken a knee during the national anthem to bring awareness to the need for more money for cancer research in America, he would not have had that response. It was the fact that he took a knee for black folk and brown folk. You rather pick the voters because you're scared of the voters picking the politicians. It frightens you. But we coming. When you are in a privileged position, equality looks